Hello and welcome to this, the fourth and final quarterfinal here at Pro Tour, Hour of Devastation. And you know what? We've had a lot of red decks in the feature match area. We get a round off for this round as the two dissenting voices in our top 8 field, Pardee and Yusuke Sasabe, get a chance to show us some other options for standard, both of which are probably quite good against these red decks.
Well, that's the idea.
So we have Pardee, he's on Black-Green Constrictor. This kind of a deck that we've seen variations on for quite some time now. It's got a bit of Delirium going on, it's got powerful removal options, and when Yusuke Constrictor starts pairing up with the likes of Rishkar, Pima Renegade, or a Walking Ballista, can really power out a lot of tokens very, very quickly indeed. On the other side of things, well, it's the deck that won the Pro Tour last time in the hands of Jerry Thompson. A few slight variations this time round, that being mono-black zombies. Let's get down to the feature match area and find out which of these non-red decks is going to be able to stick it to people here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. Hello and welcome to this, the fourth and final quarterfinal here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas, and our last players in the quarterfinals are just ready to go. First up, we have Pardee. This is his second Pro Tour top 8, and he's got a little bit of history when it comes to Black-Green. He was able to make top 8 of Pro Tour Eldritch Moon with a list that has many similar features to what we've got going on here. His opponent, Yusuke Sasabe, he is on the deck that won the very last Pro Tour, that being Zombies, and might well be quite a good choice for this field because apparently has a great matchup against Red. In order to get there, though, he is going to have to defeat Pardee, who is on the play on this one.
This is the one matchup Sam didn't want to play against in this top 8 here. He doesn't like his matchup against Zombies, and if he can get by this, it's mono red, all the way down. But getting by Zombies could be difficult for Sam.
Yeah, early Dread Wanderer met by a Grim Flare from Pardee, who would love to be able to get that Grim Flare up to 4/4 if he can get to Delirium, but it could well be that he finds attacking through creatures a little bit tricky because this mono black Zombies deck can just power out a lot of creatures.
Sam is playing a deck with generally 1-for-1 removal and a lot of ground creatures. Zombies just traditionally does well against those decks. So it's going to be a challenge for Sam to defeat Yusuke here, assuming that neither player has particularly fantastic draws.
So Sasabe here, just kicking things off on turn 2, he had Ifnir Deadlands and another Dread Wanderer. Not necessarily the powerhouse creatures that he'd be looking for, but Evolving Wilds is going to be a slow land for Pardee here too. Hopefully he's got a 2-drop to work with so that he can keep things going. There's a Dissenter's Deliverance in hand. That one basically just cycles in this matchup. There are no artifacts in Sasabe's deck. However, Fatal Push and Grasp of Darkness, these are the kinds of interactions that might prove helpful for him.
And Yusuke has played with a bit of discipline here. He has a Fatal Push in hand, is choosing not to cast it on this Grimflare, potentially saving it for something a bit more threatening. But getting a hit on Grimflare does give Sam an advantage. I'm surprised he didn't fire that off here. He must very much fear something like a Winding Constrictor.
Yeah, some of the creatures in this deck more immediately problematic than others. Pardee's deck, the Black-Green Constrictor deck, does kind of want to get critical mass of creatures that are interacting well with one another. The Zombies deck, everything interacts well because they've all got the word zombie on and they just sort of pile up on you. But we'll see how things go here early on. A couple of cards going, just the one card, sorry, Fatal Push going to the graveyard thanks to Grim Flare. I think there might be a Nissa on top of Pardee's deck at this point.
Wow, and Sasabe still choosing not to cast that Fatal Push, especially in such a mana-light hand. That is an aggressive non-usage of a removal spell, so he clearly has plans for that.
A swing for 4 here coming from Sasabe, and Relentless Dead coming along. Now, I guess one slight point of reprieve for Pardee here is that it is Sasabe here missing land drops, and some of the big threats that are coming from the Zombies deck do require a little bit more than the 2 mana available to him thus far. Also, those Ifnir Deadlands, they are going to do little points of damage here and there for Sasabe's deck because actually there's a large amount of black mana requirements in the Zombies deck.
It is not free to play Ifnir Deadlands. I mean, the card is well worth playing, is very strong, but in draws like this, so far it's dealt 2 damage to Yusuke, and it's likely to deal 2 to 4 more damage over the course of the game.
Well, here comes Nissa for Pardee. Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, so he's going to get a chance to immediately make a plant token. If Sasabe is planning on going wide, then having all of these extra creatures to block with certainly of value, and at some point he can start putting counters on all of his creatures. If he's already got a Winding Constrictor in play, then that could go very well for him indeed.
Well, saving that Fatal Push can work out all right here because Yusuke might want to Fatal Push the plant token and attack both Dread Wanderers into Nissa. Where that works out very poorly, though, is if Sam has a push of his own and then it foils that whole attack.
And it looks like Sasabe simply attacking in and using his mana to cast a Relentless Dead, just getting more bodies on the board for now. Still no third land, though, for Sasabe, so he's got 2 copies of Liliana's Mastery, a Digraph Colossus, and a Lord of the Accursed that are basically languishing in his hand, unable to be cast just yet. And Verdurous Gearhulk coming down, meaning that all of a sudden there is a gigantic attack force available to Sam Pardee.
Wow, Sasabe really getting punished for not casting Fatal Push on that Grimflayer. It's going to have hit 3 times now, and this is not the kind of game where you can afford to miss out on mana, especially with so few lands in play. So I think we're going to see this game swing towards Sam, and I can't help but think the game could have been different if that Fatal Push got cast on turn 2.
And with that Planeswalker going to the graveyard off the Grimflayer hit, I believe that we have just got ourselves up to Delirium. So Grimflayer now a 6/6. That meaning that it is safe from Grasp of Darkness. Fatal Push, that'll still do the trick. Another Ifnir Deadlands for Yusuke Sasabe. That does mean that his 3-drops come online.
But they're just outclassed by that Grimflayer, which he now has to use Fatal Push on. So it's not turning out well for the zombie horde. And in fact, looks like Sam might actually steal a game here.
Sam carefully watching what's going on here, making sure that he just gets a feel for if there are particular sort of patterns of play that Yusuke moves into. This Sasabe's very first Pro Tour. So in terms of the level of experience of these two, we've got one relatively seasoned player who is having a fantastic season this year and already has a fairly potent board against someone who's just kind of getting a feel for what being on the Pro Tour is all about. We will, of course, see Sasabe at our very next Pro Tour, finishing the top 8, of course, qualifying him for the next one. Rishkar Pima Renegade coming down. Still more counters being thrown around by Sam Pardee's deck. Don't necessarily need to have a Winding Constrictor in play to have a gigantic team.
Yeah, between Niska and Rishkar, Sam is just assembling an incredible attack force here. And Sam, in fact, has Grasp of Darkness in hand that he can strategically cast during combat because 2 of his biggest threats have Trample.
Very rough position for Sasabe to be in here on this first game of the best of 5 match, so there's plenty of time to pull things back. A big old grip of cards for Sasabe, but not necessarily too many of them he can deploy just yet.
And Yusuke trying to figure out how to survive this turn, and it's going to be difficult, especially given the fact that Sam has a grasp at the ready here.
Yeah, even the best case scenario where this is kind of the naked attack without anything else going on is not good for the Japanese player here.
No. Virtuous Gearhulk is just smashing in there as an 8/8. It is living up to the Hulk name.
Having to double block a plant token here.
Well, we got there eventually on the Fatal Push, so there is that is a point in Yusuke's favor here.
One fears the damage has been done on that count, though. In addition to everything else going on with the Grimflayer, it will have been improving Sam Pardee's draws just a little bit. And Sam opts to kill off one of the Dread Wanderers just so that he can make sure that he doesn't lose more creatures in this attack. Doesn't need to push through too much damage. Gets a Dread Wanderer back with that Relentless Dead. And
now deciding whether to pay a life in order to get Relentless Dead back. But either way, I don't think that this game is going in Yusuke's favor here.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, unless he draws another land, it's paying 2 life. But if he draws another land, then he's got other things that he might want to be doing more than recasting Relentless Dead anyway. Just because of all that damage from If Near Dead lands. So another swamp, the pickup there, and Yusuke Sasabe scoops up his cards. Pardee picks up the first game with relatively straightforward play on his side of things. Relatively big decision for Yusuke Sasabe in terms of how to deal with that Grim Flayer, and may have proven costly for him there.
Well, this is a really fast matchup in terms of both players just going to play to the board over the first couple turns. Not as fast as Mono Red, but still fast enough that, yeah, missing out on an early removal spell can really change the texture of the game.
Well, we are going to have one more game of pre-sideboarded Magic between these two soon enough, but stay with us, because first we have these messages.
Grand Prix events offer great experiences for players of all skill levels. These Magic celebrations are headlined by 2-day open tournaments with pro players, feature top artist signings, and host a wide range of side events. Find an upcoming Grand Prix event near you at magic.wizards.com/Grand Prix.
Looking for a challenge? Magic Online offers monthly limited and constructed events, which lead to the yearly Magic Online Championship. Download Magic Online at mtgo.com and start earning the points you need to enter.
Hello and welcome back to this, the fourth and final quarterfinal here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation. We have Pardee already a game up against Yusuke Sasabe, and his Black-Green Delirium deck with Winding Constrictor and so on is going to have to find a way of trying to press the advantage that he's already achieved in what's kind of a rough matchup against the Japanese players' zombies list. No turn 1 zombie from Sasuke, but the 7-card hand was good enough to keep. I'm kind of intrigued about not seeing anything on turn 2 either, though.
Well, he's got a Fatal Push. Let's see if the Grimflayer survives unscathed this time.
No. Once bitten, twice shy for Yusuke Sasabe there. Kills off the Grimflayer at the first opportunity.
I guess Sam was really pushing it, trying to go for it once again.
Proved a mistake that proved fatal for that Grimflayer. So here we have Lord of the Accursed. Didn't get a chance to make it into play in the last game. Never an opportunity to cast it for Sasabe, who was a bit short on lands. This time round, though, each player hitting their land drops nice and easy. Nissa coming down for Sam Pardee, immediately making a plant token, which is going to potentially jump in the way to protect its owner here. No, as it turns out, Sam's fine with just simply letting Nissa go down to 2 loyalty.
Nissa, a very powerful card, but she does not see as much play as you might expect. Ever since the days of the dominant green-white tokens deck we saw last year, Nissa's kind of faded into the background. But Sam Pardee, a fervent believer in the strength of Nissa, and you see his black-green deck really poised to take advantage of her.
And I guess that both getting lots of creatures on the board, getting tokens on those creatures, and effectively forming a bit of a life buffer, all relevant things for Sam Pardee as he loses that plant token to removal coming from in the form of Dark Salvation from Sasabe. And this, one of the reasons that the Zombies deck is sometimes thought of to be pretty good against the red deck, is it gets to kill things while making threats and just kind of go wide with relative ease. Tireless Tracker coming down, bringing a clue, another plant token coming from Sam Pardee. This game rocking and rolling, good and fast here.
I like Yusuke's position, though. Dark Salvation is exactly the kind of card that gives you an advantage in a game like this, and being able to cast it for 2, put 2 3/3s into play this turn as an option is very strong. And Yusuke doesn't get to kill Nissa this turn because Sam can chump the 3/3 zombie with his plant, and then Lord can take the Nissa down to 1, but that's still going to leave Yusuke in a dominant position, and Sam... Well, he hasn't drawn any copies of Fatal Push or Grasp of Darkness, so he's currently unable to deal with that Lord of the Accursed.
Presumably, if he really wanted to kill off Nissa, there are options involving casting Dark Salvation for less or using Fatal Push in order to then use Lord of the Accursed's ability for Menace. As things stand, though, he just wants to get as many zombies on the board as possible, given that the Lord is making them so much bigger. Kills off the Tireless Tracker. That was the biggest threat on the battlefield at the moment, and now we're going to get a chance to see him entering the red zone.
I like just maxing out on Dark Salvation here. I think that ends up being the most profitable line. One thing that Sam does have going for him is he has a Traverse the Overwald in hand, and he has plenty of lands, so what he's going to want to do is wait till he hits Delirium. And the fact that Nissa might be threatened at some point, and the fact that he's got a Walking Ballista in hand that provides an artifact type, means that he's not maybe too far away from being able to hit full Delirium on Traverse.
And if you're looking for cards that are going to go to the graveyard good and quick, the Dissenter's Deliverance that's basically just in the deck as a cycler in this matchup, immediately getting cashed in for a new card. Same sort of thing happening with that clue token.
Well, Dissenter's Deliverance does some good work here in providing an instant for Delirium count. So that's part of the reason that this deck can afford to play it, is that it gives you a little bit of extra types that can head to the graveyard and enable Traverse the Ulvenwald and Grimflayer.
Traverse the Ulvenwald, a card that's even seen play in Modern. Relatively easy to get to Delirium there, and being able to search up any creature for just a single green mana, a very, very potent ability.
Nissa's gaining Sam a ton of life this game. She's blocked multiple times. Her loyalty's been under attack by various zombies, but even though it looks like she might finally bite the bullet this turn, it's still going to have bought Sam a lot of time for him to get his more powerful cards online.
Yeah, I mean, look at this. He's already got 5 mana. He's on 18 life still. Not a bad position for him to be in here. Sasabe, his early turns, very powerful, but at this point, he kind of would have hoped to maybe get a little bit more damage in.
So it looks like the 3 zombies are shambling over towards Nissa, which will, in fact, take her down unless Sam has a removal spell in hand, which we know he doesn't, with Lord dealing just 2 points to Sam himself.
And the follow-up being a Relentless Dead. Nice to be able to play Relentless Dead with a bit of mana up so that even if it does get killed off, there's the potential to use its various triggered abilities. It looks like Sam has one of his combos. There we see a Winding Constrictor, and I believe there's also a Walking Ballista here. So he's cast it with X equals 2. That means that it's going to end up with 3 counters on it, assuming that the snake is able to survive until the point that the Walking Ballista comes into play. That assumption proving to ultimately be false. There is the fatal push coming from Sasabe. He's able to kill off the snake, so it's just a 2-2 Walking Ballista, and a 2-2 Walking Ballista in the face of a bunch of 3-3 zombies might not be quite good enough.
No, and being able to keep his Lord of the Accursed alive by killing that Winding Constrictor is critical for Yusuke. He's now able to just attack with a gigantic horde of zombies, and Sam is facing almost an insurmountable lead here. Just the fact that Lord of the Accursed just lived the entire game is something that is going to make it almost impossible for Sam to win this.
If near Deadlands there being used as a straight-up removal spell on Walking Ballista. A parting shot coming from the artifact creature, but that means that all the fewer blockers for the gigantic attack force coming from Yusuke Sasabe here.
Sam is either going to take the full 14 damage this turn or potentially take 11 if he chumps. Either way, him surviving next turn is going to be quite a stretch.
Yeah, the Black-Green Constrictor deck, yes, it does have a fair amount of removal, does not have much in the way of sweepers, so dealing with this number of zombies at this point going to prove tough.
What Sam needed here was to draw a Fatal Push to potentially go with Kalitas, and he's unfortunate that he could traverse for, because he does at this point have Delirium, but there's no single traverse target that really is going to get him out of this. In fact, he doesn't even have Ishkana Graph Widow in his main deck.
Ishkana, a card that saw a lot of play back at the last time that Sam Pardee was in the top 8 of the Pro Tour around the time of Eldritch Moon. Fallen a little bit behind in terms of popularity recently, but potentially due a little bit of resurgence.
Yeah, that was a really good top 8.
So along comes Kalitas here. Kalitas likes to eat zombies, but in this instance, I'm not sure that that hunger is going to be enough to keep Sam Pardee in the game. Lifelink, kind of relevant, kind of helpful, but given that Lord of the Accursed can provide menace to all of the zombies on the other side of things, I'll be impressed if Sam can make it through this turn.
And indeed, he will not.
All right, it's 1-1 between Sam Pardee and Yusuke Sasabe. Now's the point where the players get a chance to go to their sideboard. So however it was that players may have felt about their matchup with the initial 60, now they're working with 75 versus 75, and we're going to get an opportunity for them to make some spot adjustments. Let's kick things off by having a look at what Sam Pardee's working with in terms of the extra 15 that he has going on. Quite a lot of singletons in here, presumably meaning that he's going to be able to do sort of fine tweaking of his deck. Any cards that really stand out for you here, Luis?
Additional Grasp of Darkness in order to kill Lord of the Accursed. Ishkana can clog up the board quite nicely, and then Gonti, Lord of Luxury, does a good job of just fighting on the ground, can tangle with a big Diregraph Colossus while stealing hopefully a removal spell from the top of Sasabe's deck. So Sam does get to tweak and take out the cards like Dissenter's Deliverance, for example, that don't have a whole lot of targets.
Meanwhile, let's have a look at what's going on the other side of things. Yusuke Sasabe, his mono black zombies doesn't need any more zombies in the sideboard because there are plenty of them in the main deck, but there are a few interesting options here available to him.
Sky Sovereign, console flagship, tailor-made for mid-range matchups. It can be a little small, actually, thanks to a Verger's Gearhulk and gigantic walking ballistas and Rishkar Pima Renegade, but it's still good enough to pick off a lot of what Sam has going on. Liliana the Last Hope. Also, she has some application in attrition matchups, though she doesn't have very many targets for her -2/-1 ability.
Now, each of these players does have access to the other's deck list. They've had time where they and their teammates have been able to test out this matchup and get a feel for it. Do we think that there might be any kind of gamesmanship in terms of second-guessing on something like Dissenter's Deliverance? There are a bunch of artifacts that, in principle, could come in this sideboarding. Is it likely that they're going to go too deep down that rabbit hole in terms of trying to adjust what they want to sideboard based on what they think the other is doing?
It is possible that Sam leaves in a Dissenter's Deliverance or two in order to kill Sky Sovereign, because otherwise it could be a bit of an issue. But I think that it's only a one of, and the Deliverance is not a card that has other targets, so he may not want that. Also worth noting that Sasabe has 2 copies of Never to Return in his sideboard, which do look pretty good against the larger creatures that Sam has on Beck and Call. And Sam does as well. So both those players are going to decide whether they want the spot removal here that can kill both planeswalkers and creatures, one and all.
Looks like these players relatively brisk in their sideboarding. At this point, I doubt that there's too much from how those first 2 games have gone that's really going to change their understanding of the matchup, relying more on the larger sample size of testing that they may have been able to get in or have their teammates get in for them the night before.
It's funny because you definitely do a lot of testing of the quarterfinal matchup, and then because you have less information about who's going to be your semis opponent and who's going to be your finals opponent, the testing isn't quite as focused. But yes, both of these players will definitely know how they're sideboarding and not likely to change a whole lot. This is a pretty straightforward matchup.
Each of these players getting good and shuffled up, ready for their game 3. The fact that their games have simply been split, when you mentioned that Sam felt like he was a little bit of a dog in this matchup, does that mean that he's got a slightly better chance because he still does have the play in this matchup?
The fact that they're 1-1 means that going into the best 2 out of 3 here, because sideboarding doesn't look like it's going to be dramatic, I would still say Sam is not a favorite here. I think that Sasabe is slightly ahead. It's close enough that Sam could certainly win. We're not talking an 80-20 matchup here, but splitting the first 2 games isn't like a huge comeback for Sam. Not quite yet.
But we'll get a chance to see whether or not the face-to-face pro is going to be able to make that happen. Sasabe simply watching on as we see Sam Pardee just finishing up his shuffling here before we get on to our game 3.
Yeah, Sam pile sorting his deck here before doing some shuffling.
It's funny, I've heard that kind of piling described as a way of getting rid of clumps in your deck, which for a long time I just rejected as being true because of course you have to shuffle afterwards. And actually something that hadn't even occurred to me is that some players, especially in these tense situations, you get sweaty hands. So when we're talking about clumps of cards, they literally can be sleeves getting a little tacky and getting stuck together that might get missed in a regular shuffle. But the final little shuffle's going on here, and we're going to get a chance to see whether or not this matchup changes too much after sideboards.
Both players have access to a few more removal spells and are going to be a little bit more focused on the creature versus creature battle that this is. But in terms of how the matchup plays out, I don't think it's dramatically different.
And Sam almost immediately going to send back his 7 there. A little smile on his face, but at least it's happening on both sides, so this is not going to be the kind of walkover multi-5s that we've seen in various other matchups where one person is starting with lots more cards than the other.
Well,
one hopes.
I think in this top 8, the person who's mulliganed has won way more often than the person who hasn't.
Mulliganing one of those sets of decisions that I think really does separate some of the better players. I know that there are some people who are very hesitant to ever mulligan, other people who maybe mulligan a little bit more aggressively. Where do you kind of fall on that line, Luis?
I don't mulligan as aggressively as some, but I think that given the way constructed matchups tend to play out these days, you should not be afraid to mulligan. The powerful cards are just so important, and curving out is just so important that it's not as much a war of attrition as maybe things used to be.
And of course, one of the things that's changed in the last few years is the fact that you get that scry once you've mulliganed means that at least the first mulligan that you take doesn't feel like quite as big a hit as maybe it did when it was simply 7 to 6 to 5 to whatever.
Oh, definitely. The scry being implemented at Pro Tour Vancouver, some years ago now, 2 years ago, was a game changer, and I think that has actually been a huge positive change.
Well, Sam has kept. He had to scry to the bottom. Sasuke is still just figuring out what he wants to do. Looks like he's going to stay on top. And Dread Wanderer, the first player of the game from Yusuke Sasabe. Winding Constrictor on the other side of things.
Sam looking to combo out here with Walking Ballista next turn, but unfortunately for him, that Winding Constrictor is probably not going to live that long.
Dread Wanderer getting stuck in here. This one of the threats that just keeps on coming back for the Zombies deck. Kind of a recurring theme, if you will. No play on turn 3 from Pardee, presumably signaling that there's a fair amount of removal in his hand. Let's see what's going on with what Sam is working with. Yep, 2 Grasp of Darkness, 1 Fatal Push.
The all removal hand, not great against the double Dread Wanderer hand. And actually, Yusuke has a very interesting play this turn. He can play Lord of the Accursed, but Sam's signaling removal, he might just play a Dread Wanderer. This is a very disciplined play, and I think a very good one.
And yeah, Sam can't afford to let even a Dread Wanderer hang around, so he does use Grasp of Darkness, can't afford to just let that mana go to waste. But that does mean that, at least in principle, the Lord of the Accursed might have been good enough. As it is, we know that Sam is, his cup runneth over when it comes to removal spells.
Yeah, I just love that play last turn from Yusuke. I think a lot of players would not have made that play. They would have played Lord because they had, 2 Lord of the Accursed and a 1-drop in hand. But baited out Grasp of Darkness very nicely with Dread Wanderer, and even though Sam has lots of removal spells here, it's still going to work out very, very, very well for Yusuke.
There we saw a nice one, using Evolving Wilds to trigger Revolt so that Fatal Push could deal with Lord of the Accursed in spite of it having 3 casting costs. You do need to get a permanent going to your, leaving the battlefield in order to make sure that you can hit things at the cost of 4 or less.
If Sam can draw land here, then he can get back into this because Verdurous Gearhulk, playing that well, Yusuke does not have mana up for Grasp of Darkness, could give Sam the opportunity he needs.
Yeah, it is a trigger on the Verdurous Gearhulk coming into play, so there's a brief moment where it would be a 4/4 and susceptible to that Grasp of Darkness. As it is, he goes for the Walking Ballista because he does not have the 5th land. And that really playing into Yusuke's hands here.
Yeah, Yusuke actually pretty happy to draw that 5th land. He can play a Dark Salvation for 2 here in order to kill the Walking Ballista and end up with 2 zombies.
First up, though, we see an attack. Walking Ballista just kind of having to pick off threats where it can. And 1 point going to the head there on as a sort of parting shot. Sasabe still with Grasp of Darkness in hand for the next threat to come from Sam Pardee, unless it works out that it's a Verdurous Gearhulk. Was a land the pickup there? We'll find out soon enough. It looks like there is a Beta Basic Swamp in his hand.
And now Sam has to decide, because the reward for playing Ballista first and being able to put the counters on the Ballista, it is big. It is a real reward. But if it doesn't work out, then he ends up maybe losing his window to play this Gearhulk. But of course, Yusuke only has 1 card in hand, so Sam really at a tough decision point here.
We do have options in hand for Sam Pardee. Walking Ballista, obviously great beforehand, but as you say, if you can't resolve that Gearhulk, then that may be a bridge too far.
And the fact that this is post-sideboard does matter here because of those 2 copies of Never to Return. Sam can't be confident that the Gearhulk will just survive. In Game 1, an 8/8 Gearhulk is pretty hard to beat, but in post-board games, that is not necessarily true.
Well, for now, we know that there's not a straightforward removal spell that can just 1-for-1 with that Verdurous Gearhulk. We'll see whether or not that changes over the subsequent turns. On 12 life, Sam Pardee needs to be a little bit careful here, but we will see whether or not that ends up turning into sort of a painful reality. 2 Dread Wanderers coming back for Yusuke on that 1 turn. No attacks, but his board filling up nicely.
Sam would not have minded drawing an untapped land this turn because he could have played a Walking Ballista for 3, and that lets him block and potentially shoot down multiple creatures. But it looks like, wow, a 2nd Gearhulk. Sam is just going for the throat here.
I like it. The double Gearhulk plan means that if one of them survived, 2 of them should be fairly safe, and 16 points of trample, he's just counting up the toughness on the other side of the battlefield. He's potentially going to be able to get rid of some of those zombies anyway with the Walking Ballista we know he has in hand. This could be a nice one for Sam Pardee here, being able to get up 2-1.
Yeah, Hulks are really smashing here. 2 8/8 Tramplers. Yusuke has Grasp of Darkness, but that's a pretty tough way to take down a Verdurous Gearhulk. And the fact that Sam's last card is a Walking Ballista means that he's really going to mess up combat math. I think Sam might be 1 draw step away from pulling into a 2-1 lead against Yusuke Sasabe here.
Yeah, Sasabe just looking on at the Grasp of Darkness in hand and seeing that it really doesn't even come close to dealing with one of these Gear Hulks. He would have to put a lot of bodies in front, and the Black-Green Constrictor deck does have a fair amount of instant speed removal, so the extent to which he'd have to block in order to be confident of killing off a Gear Hulk is painful.
What Sasabe can do here is he can, if he attacks and Sam blocks, he can then grasp plus use Ifnir Deadlands to take down the Gear Hulk. That leaves Sam taking 6, falling to 6, and not having lethal on the backswing. Unfortunately for Sasabe, that play is thwarted by the fact that Sam has Walking Ballista in hand.
So Ifnir Deadlands does shrink down one of those Verdurous Gear Hulks, and the mana works out nicely so that Grasp of Darkness is still up. All right, here we go. It's only a Walking Ballista for 2, but 2 is already pretty good.
And then Fatal Push was the draw for Sam. So that's even better than drawing a land, because now he can Fatal Push away a 2 toughness creature. Sabe has 4 toughness plus a Grasp of Darkness, so that essentially stops 8 damage. He's going to be able to live through this turn, but it's not going to be pretty. He's going to lose a lot of his board and be in a position where even, being able to clog the board is something zombies can do, not against 2 gigantic Verdurous Gear Hulks.
Yusuke here just trying to figure out these blocks.
And it's funny because these blocks look like they could be complicated. It's 2 creatures attacking 4 creatures. But because the Gear Hulks both have trample, because Sam has multiple removal spells, it almost doesn't matter where Sabe blocks. Sam has the same amount of options either way. And Sam is the one who really has control over how this goes.
The Japanese player deep in the tank at this point. Sam Pardee, he's not really let on too much sort of emotion get into this game thus far. I know that you work with him. Is he the sort of person that when he's winning or losing, you can tell just by his face sort of thing?
Not really. Sam has a pretty calm demeanor regardless of whether things are going well or poorly for him. And that's a valuable skill when it comes to, not giving up any information to the opponent.
All right, we see a quad block on the 8/8 Verdurous Gear Hulk here. Sasabe just keeping his hands on the cards just as he finalizes it in his head. We'll see a little gesture there say, yep, those are my blocks. And for a kickoff, Walking Ballista starts taking down the smaller zombies involved in this fight.
So currently, Sam is trampling over for 3 and then dealing 6 more damage. So that's 9 damage. That takes Sasabe down to 2. Not quite lethal, but this is working out well enough for Sam that he's content just to see what Sasabe has, though unsurprisingly to Sam, it's going to be a Grasp of Darkness.
Grasp of Darkness met with Fatal Push. Lots of creatures going to the graveyard. Ultimately, all on Sasabe's side of the battlefield. Drops to 3. 2 Verdurous Gear Hulks in play. This is going to have to be a great draw. It is not great enough. We are going to game 4 with Sam Pardee up 2-1 here in the series.
All right. Now Sam's a favorite. it turns out winning the 3rd game critical in his chances to win the match. So I think the numbers check out. We can get Frank Carson on the line, but Sam just needs to pull out one of the next 2 games in order to advance to the semifinals here.
And really, as far as Sam's concerned, the super tough match in his top 8.
He would much prefer to play against the mono red decks, and like Turtles, it is mono red all the way down here. Sam is going to face down 2 mono red decks, guaranteed over the next 2 rounds if he can defeat Yusuke Sasabe here.
So we're going to get a chance to look at some of the key cards in these decks and indeed the matchup. So we're going to kick things off with Winding Constrictor, the powerful 2/3 that we've seen a fair amount of play from in Standard.
Winding Constrictor has been a major player throughout its entire lifespan in Standard. In Sam's deck, it powers up Walking Ballista, Verdurous Gear Hulk, has combos with Rishkar, Pima Renegade, and Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. Basically anything that involves counters, it does well with. Though a funny interaction we were talking about earlier, Ifnir Deadlands targeting Winding Constrictor actually just kills it because it is -1/-1 counters, and the Winding Constrictor does not work in your favor when it comes to that.
I mean, just the fact it's a 2/3 body for 2, a fair amount of the time is relevant as well. If we look at the creatures in the red decks, if we look at all of these zombies that are knocking around, it's got a nice, neat set of stats to be able to tussle just before you even worry about the abilities, but it is, of course, the very powerful ability relating to counters that really throws things around. Let's move on and get a chance to look at a card that sets up this and many of the other combos, that being Traverse the Ulvenwald. The basic side of it, you get to find lands, but it becomes so powerful when we get to the late game.
This is one of the cards that makes Sam's deck tick because he gets to play fewer lands than he would otherwise because his copies of Traverse, he has 4 of them, mean that he gets to kind of cheat on land because he knows he can Traverse for his second, third land a lot of the time. But then late game, you top deck this and, you know, it turns into a Kalitas or a post board, maybe an Ishkanal or a Walking Ballista. And that kind of flexibility, it's kind of funny comparison, but this is similar to Ramanap Ruins in the red deck. This is your mana base in the late game turning into a threat.
Yeah. I guess that when you look at this, if it's in your opening hand and you've got a green source and not any other lands, it's functionally a land, more or less. Maybe a land that comes into play tapped. And then on the late game, it's your best creature. So a very powerful one. We're going to get a chance to see a few more, though. Well, let's move across and get a chance to see Walking Ballista. Good on its own, great with a Winding Constrictor. And
this is another card in Sam's deck that is, you know, good on turn 2 or 3, certainly passable against the red deck, against a zombie deck, and then it's also a 6-drop or an 8-drop. It has combos with Winding Constrictor. It enables Delirium, you know, for Traverse the Ulvenwald and Grimflare because it is an artifact. And this is kind of like one of the hallmarks of Sam's deck is a lot of very flexible cards that are good in different situations and play different roles at the same time. So Walking Ballista fits perfectly into that game plan.
Yeah, there are some decks we describe as an early game deck or a late game deck. Sam's deck can kind of transition between the two very fluidly indeed. So we're going to move across and have a look at some of the key cards in Sasabe's deck. We're kicking off with Crypt Breaker. For a 1-drop, this one does a lot.
Crypt Breaker is the most powerful engine in the deck because it's a 1-drop that draws you extra card and makes a whole horde of zombies if you ever end up in a situation where you have too many lands, or even discarding cards like Dreadwander is a nice little combo. The fact that this powers your late game and your early game at the same time is really why Zombies, well, it won the last Pro Tour, it's here in the top 8, and still could win this Pro Tour.
In terms of making lots of zombies, there are a few other options. Dark Salvation, one of them, a very powerful removal spell, and we're getting a bit of a theme here about the mix between the early game and the late game. All of these cards, if you have it early on, fine, but in the late game, wow, this can do a lot of work.
And we saw Sasabe, you know, kill a plant token early and then later kill a Walking Ballista while getting a bunch of zombies into play to combo with Lord of the Accursed. So yes, Dark Salvation, a very powerful card in this deck.
Flexible cards, powerful at all stages in the game. Let's see how many of them play out as the players are ready. And we're going to get a chance to see our game 4 now. Sam Pardee currently 2 games to 1 up against Yusuke Sasabe. No turn 1 play from Sasabe beyond that basic swamp. A nice looking basic swamp though. I think I know there's a Saga one. Blooming Marsh from Pardee.
And I always appreciate when players take the time to match their lands instead of just maybe going to a land box like certain Hall of Famers, Paulo Vitor Damarosa, not naming any names.
Lord of the Accursed coming down on turn 3. The first zombie for Sasabe, but it will mean that all future ones are just a touch larger. And Evolving Wilds, it's helping out Delirium, it's making sure that the mana's all sorted, doing lots of work for Sam Pardee. Of course, we saw in the last game even setting up a Fatal Push to be able to kill off bigger threats.
Yeah, we're going to see that again this game. This is a very good opening for Sam because Sasabe's first play is on turn 3 and Sam spent a 1-mana card to kill it.
And he would have wanted to use that Evolving Wilds at some point anyway. He basically just got a little bit of extra value there by using it to trigger Revolt. Looks like land's not the problem for Sam Pardee here, and he may even get a chance to throw down a Planeswalker. There is Liliana of the Last Hope coming down, immediately gaining some loyalty. You don't need for there to be a creature in play to use the +1. It's up to 1 target creature getting -1, -2, -1 until your next turn. Could we be seeing the Zombies deck succumbing to a horde of zombies from a Liliana Ultimate at some point?
It is certainly possible. Liliana ticks up very quickly. Drawing that Diagraph Colossus was pretty good for Sasabe's side of the board because he's got a very reactive hand. He has Fatal Push, Grasp of Darkness, and Dark Salvation in hand. So he's a bunch of removal spells. He just wanted a threat, and the Diagraph Colossus does provide that.
Tireless Tracker, another very flexible card that's in Sam Pardee's deck. Gets to play it, immediately plays a land to generate a clue. Often I think of this card as kind of being like a 4-drop because you do really want to get that first clue at least off it. Big draw, though, here for Sasabe. He finds his big old skyship. Are we going to get a chance to see it coming into play? Is there the land available for Sasabe to cast Sky Sovereign console flagship? It looks like not quite yet, but soon enough.
Sasabe really hoped to draw a zombie there to trigger the Diregraph Colossus ability. He does have removal. He's going to be able to kill this Tireless Tracker, but he's not going to be able to add to his board in too relevant of a fashion. He can Dark Salvation in order to put a 2/2 into play, and really hopes to draw a land next turn because he has 2 powerful 5-drops in hand, Sky Sovereign and Liliana's Mastery.
So the Digraph Colossus coming in. Remember, of course, it is only 1 power at the moment thanks to Liliana's ability. So Liliana's kind of at loyalty parity right now. But the fact that he's not been able to keep threats on the board, at least for now, a little problematic for Sam.
And Sam has a slightly awkward hand. He does have 2 copies of Traverse the Uvenwald, you can see there, and is 1 off of Delirium. He has land, instant, and creature. So when Liliana goes to the graveyard, which she likely will over the next couple turns, Sam will be able to cast those Delirium Traverses. But for right now, Sasabe has the initiative, and even though Sam has another Tireless Tracker, it is just going to fall to a removal spell.
So Sam cracks a clue. That clue, of course, not counting as an artifact in the graveyard for Delirium, just a token. Draws him a card nonetheless, though.
Yeah, and that card was a good one. Grasp of Darkness, being able to take down Diregraph Colossus, puts Sam into a much better position. And Sam actually willing to play a Traverse without Delirium in order to ensure Delirium next turn by dropping a sorcery into the graveyard.
Hitting land drops, not the end of the world, as we've said so often about this deck. It does have very versatile cards that when you hit the late game can be very potent, and it just means that he's definitely going to be able to get whatever those key creatures are for this matchup on time.
All right, this is a big draw step for Yusuke. If he can draw a land and play Liliana's Mastery or Sky Sovereign, then he's in good shape. If he can't, if he draws another reactive spell, then he's not going to be able to pressure Liliana, because remember that zombie's a 0/1, and that's going to let Sam untap, have Traverse with Delirium, have another Tireless Tracker, and really be able to get onto the board quickly.
All right, big draw here. What do we have? It is a swamp. All right. Plenty of options now available to Yusuke Sasabe. Let's see which one he goes with.
If he plays Liliana's Mastery, his zombie will become a 3/3 with the -2/-1 applied by Liliana, so he gets to attack for 1. Sky Sovereign gets to deal 3 damage directly to Liliana, but doesn't commit as much to the board. Looks like he's favoring that Sky Sovereign, though. Either way, Yusuke is going to be pretty happy with how this turn plays out. He's got 2 very, very powerful 5-drops, and drawing his 5th land on time is very good for him.
Definitely a little bit of a worry going into it, but knocks Liliana down to 2 loyalty here. And Verdrus Gearhulk, the pickup for Sam Pardee, is that likely to change his decision-making this turn?
Certainly gives him an option to play. He did have a Traverse and a 6 land, so he could have played Gearhulk either way, but knowing that he's got a Gearhulk on deck as well is going to help. Unfortunately for Sam, he doesn't have something like Manglehorn, which would be a way to get rid of that Sky Sovereign, but that's the strength of playing just 1 artifact in your deck. Have artifact removal, not all that powerful against someone with just 1 artifact, but when you do draw that artifact, that Sky Sovereign, your opponent could be in trouble. Sam also looking at his Liliana potentially dying here, so he decided, while he does decide to take it up, it could very well have been a play where he would just decide not to increase Liliana's loyalty and just cash her in to get a creature back.
Well, Verdrus Gearhulk coming down as an 8/8, that'll be safe enough from any shots coming over the bow of the Sky Sovereign on the other side of the battlefield. But Sasabe with 5 mana and being able to cast 5 mana spells, in good shape.
And Sam's going to try to set up for a straight race here. Sky Sovereign is going to be able to take out Liliana, is going to be able to clock Sam for 6 points of damage, but Sam's going to be able to attack back with his Verdrus Gearhulk for a good amount of damage.
Who let a zombie in charge of a skyship? This seems like a terrible plan, but it's working out for Yusuke Sasabe here, taking down Liliana. Delirium very much enabled, as if it wasn't already, as the Planeswalker goes to the bin. And Sasabe, he's got removal in hand. He's got another Relentless Dead, which will potentially be able to get back his Digraph Colossus if he needs to. Good position for the Zombies player to be at this point, still on 20 life.
I do like Sam potentially just going for the throat here. He could Traverse for another Gearhulk, make the current Gearhulk a 12/12, and just attack for 12 points of trample. hoping that his second Gearhulk is able to block a zombie and prevent himself from taking lethal on the following turn.
Yeah, going big's definitely an option here, and I'm sure that Sam Pardee, he's been working with Traverse the Elvenwald for so long that he's got a very good idea of what his options are in terms of fetching, but the decision trees do get very complicated when you have as much search in your deck as this.
Certainly, and having options like Ishkana means that he can try to win the race with the Gearhulk he already has in play without adding another attacker to the board, and use Ishkana to keep back and chump that Sky Sovereign over the course of the next 2 turns.
Yeah, when we look at the cards in hand for Sam Pardee, even though there's only the 4 of them, functionally so many more because of that Traverse the Elvenwald, he has a look through. Let's see what he's going to go for.
One way, in order for Sam to survive this turn, he has to have, if he plays the second Gearhulk and puts all the counters on the current one, then Grasp of Darkness plus Relentless Dead actually does let Sasabe attack for lethal. So one way to play around that, Sam can put 1 counter on the fresh Gearhulk and 3 on the one that gets to attack for 11, have a 5/5 back to block. Though then Grasp plus the Sky Sovereign's trigger will actually take down that Gearhulk. So Sam actually looks like he's gonna end up taking lethal next turn because Sasabe has a combination of a way to crew Sky Sovereign, which would be the Relentless Dead in hand, and Grasp of Darkness. So unless Sam has a fatal push, which we know he doesn't, he's actually going to have to win a game 5 here.
Sasabe here just untapping. He's already got everything he needs, but there's going to be an extra card on top just as the icing on the cake. Never to return the pickup.
Never to return would make the racing plan not work, even if Sasabe didn't have a way to go for lethal this turn. Though, it might change his decision because he doesn't know that Sam doesn't have Fatal Push, and he might not want to put himself dead to the Gearhulk on the crackback if Sam does. So it's actually a case of hidden information giving Sam potentially another turn here.
When you know that you have a momentary advantage, there's obviously the temptation to just go for it every time, and some of it's just going to come down to temperament. It's going to come down to how you feel on the day. But part of it, sort of, you know that if you make the wrong choice, Sam Pardee's already up 2 games to 1. There's a lot of incentive for Sasabe to be conservative here, just to try and make sure that he doesn't throw away this game and ultimately his time in this top 8.
And it looks like he is going to take the slightly more conservative line if he's going to crew Sky Sovereign with the zombie he already has in play.
Grasp of Darkness finishing off the Verdurous Gearhulk after Sky Sovereign's already done its good work. And never to return, meaning that now Sam Pardee's board, well, just lands, most of which basic. It looks like Sasabe may have been able to lock this one up and force a game 5. Yet another game 5 in this top 8. It has been back and forth magic, and there's a little round of applause coming from the Japanese members of the crowd cheering on their countryman here, who has been able to find a way of forcing it to all come down to this one final game before we get to any of our semi-finals here in Kyoto, Japan. Really interesting to me watching Sam Pardee's deck, how much it can pivot based on the exact situation it finds itself in. With the likes of Traverse the Elvenwald, it can go from being, well, I'm this control deck that's kind of killing things off, to all of a sudden, look how fast I can kill you.
And that's kind of what you get when you have cards like Traverse the Elvenwald, which do let you play kind of both sides of the court. They let you play offense when you want to press the advantage with Gearhulk, or let you play defense when you want to go get Ishkana or maybe a defensive Walking Ballista.
I guess that the dark side of having a deck with this many options is that, to me, it appears to be a little bit trickier to play.
Sam does have a toolbox deck, and those do take a lot of metagame knowledge to construct and game experience to play, because you do have to know what your game plan is from really the early turns, because you get to sculpt so much of it.
And of course, the likes of Tireless Tracker and so on means that frequently you have a lot of cards in hand, a lot of options to work with. Also, This very much a sort of well-oiled machine at this point. It's something that Sam Pardee's been working with in various incarnations for a while now, and that experience really paying off in terms of him both reaching this top 8 and getting as far as he had in this fourth and final quarterfinals here. Each of these players basically knowing that of the games that they have coming up, well, for one of them it'll be their last game, but for the other, in principle, this game may prove tougher than much of what they have to follow. This is kind of the gatekeeper for them to get to play against all of the red decks that each of these guys will have really had in mind when they made their deck selection for this Pro Tour.
Yeah, both these players eager to play against red. How good their matchup actually is, that's less clear. It's hard to be too big of a favorite against a red deck that's as aggressive as this one, just because if you stumble, you frequently will lose. But both players would rather play against red and what they're currently facing right now. The Swamp Mirror match, not really what they were hoping for in this top 8.
Of course, Sam Pardee, the strength of this finish, in addition to having such a good season, means that I believe that we may well get a chance to see him again at the World Championship. He was there in Seattle last year, putting up these big performances. It's not just about the one tournament for many of these pro players. When you rack up enough pro points, the rewards are many and various.
Yep, we will see Sam at Worlds. I actually had the pleasure of working with him last year for Worlds, though I will not be this year.
All right, players drawing their opening 7s. Let's see what Sam's got to work with. Gonti, Lord of Luxury in there. He's got basic lands. He's got spells. I think this seems like a good enough one to work with on the face of things.
Oh, this is a very good hand for Sam because he can traverse for a swamp on turn 1, setting up a curve of Winding Constrictor into either Never to Return or potentially looks like a Tireless Tracker, and Gonti, Lord of Luxury on 4. So it's about the best he can hope for, and it's in the face of Sasabe mulliganing.
Mulligans, they've been a feature of this top 8. These players not afraid to send back a 7 that doesn't seem to be working for them. We will find out exactly how far down the mulligans go for Sasabe soon enough. Not really where you want to be, but at least there's that scry going on that means that all is not lost just yet. And of course, if you're looking for a game that proves that just because you mulligan does not mean that you're not in the thick of things, go back and check some of the videos on demand and check out the very first quarterfinal that happened with Paulo Vitor Damaderosa. Many mulligans, some of which worked out better than others. So here's the scry. So 6 is going to be the keep for Sasabe, and he does leave that card on top. So we know it's a fairly good one. Traverse the Elvenwald coming from Sam Pardee, and as you called it, he fetches that swamp. That means that the mana is going to be sorted for the early terms for Sam, even though he had actually another swamp in hand anyway. Is using the traverse there to get a land simply because he can see that he's got 2, 3, 4 and wants to make sure he can hit all of them without any kind of risk.
Definitely, and Sam is not that close to getting Delirium, so he certainly has incentive to fire off that traverse as early as possible.
Well, potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 as the pickup there was a Verdurous Gearhulk. If for some crazy reason Winding Constrictor still in play when the Gearhulk hits the battlefield, that will prove very potent indeed. Just extra counters thrown all around. Grasp of Darkness meaning that the snake not long for this world, but you know what? We already know that Sam has follow-up. Goes for another traverse here.
I like this play. Sam doesn't want to play a Tireless Tracker into a removal spell without playing a land to get a clue. And again, he's just not that close to Delirium, so ensuring that he has a smooth curve over the next 2 turns is much better than getting greedy and just playing a Tireless Tracker, especially since it would likely get hit by a Never to Return. And instead, if Sasabe doesn't draw a 3-drop, he's just going to spend his whole turn 3 doing nothing. This is a big turn for Sam. If Sasabe misses here, Sam is in very good shape.
Well, if near Deadland's the pickup there, at the moment, worse than a swamp as far as Sasabe is concerned. Until he can activate it, it's just a swamp that hurts him. Also, you know, spoiling the aesthetic of those beautiful Saga lands. Gonti, Lord of Luxury coming down, and that means that the first person to cast an awesome zombie from Sasabe's deck may prove to be Sam Pardee here. Even if Gonti gets killed off, the exiled card from this effect will still be fair game for Pardee to cast. And we will see if we can find out what that is, because it's always nice to be in on the secret, even if Sasabe doesn't know what it is that's been taken off the top of his deck.
It's likely going to be either Fatal Push or Crypt Breaker. He's not going to want to put a Dread Wanderer there, I think, all that often, because if he puts a Dread Wanderer under Gonti, then casts it, then it dies, it ends up in Sasabe's graveyard. It's not really where you want it to be.
Another Ifnir Deadlands the pick up here. Sasabe's deck really not showing him any love in this 5th game in the series. Just swamps in play, so many more swamps in hand. At least next turn he's going to be able to cast Liliana's Mastery, but he's taken so many turns without really doing anything to impact this game. Meanwhile, it's plain sailing for Sam Pardee, just casting spell after spell. Blooming Marsh coming in tapped, meaning that a clue works out. And, oh, there's the Crypt Breaker coming into play on Sam Pardee's side of things. And in principle, it's definitely possible that Sam could be drawing some cards with it if he chooses to use Crypt Breaker to generate more zombies for himself.
Well, Liliana's Masters get to start hitting here, and that at least gives Sasabe a foothold on getting the board stable, but Sam is going to get to slam a Virtuous Gearhulk here, and that's going to change things dramatically.
Ifnir Deadlands being used to take down that Tireless Tracker. I guess that was really the one window for Tireless Tracker to be killed off in such a fashion, but it does mean that we're not going to see Liliana's Mastery on turn 5 from Yusuke Sasabe, in spite of the fact that he had so many lands to work with.
And that's just putting Sam very, very far ahead, because now he gets to play Gearhulk, he gets to distribute the counters, and that means that he's got potentially 3 different threats here if he puts counters on both Crypt Breaker and Gonti, which means that Sasabe, he can take a turn off to cast Never to Return. It can only deal with one of the threats. Liliana's Mastery just not big enough to really stop these cards, and that's just going to mean that Sam has the initiative, he has life total. Because of the clue from Tireless Tracker, he's not out of gas yet. I think this game is really going in Sam's direction.
Another Ifnir Deadlands the pickup. All it is about for Sasabe at this point is lands, and while his lands have effects that are a little bit similar to spells, they're not quite as potent as various of the spells that he'd be drawing. He's a creature deck that has yet to play a creature.
Yeah, just all dead draws for Sasabe here, and he's just too far behind now. He can play Liliana's Mastery, but 2 3/3s are just not going to stop a 4/5 Death Touch and a 6/6 Trampler. He can cast Never to Return, taking down the Gearhulk, but that just gives Sam free reign to attack with Gonti and start activating Crypt Breaker, making some zombies. So this is going to be a really hard game for Sasabe to win, because every single one of his turns has been just horribly inefficient, just based on, kind of how his cards have lined up against Sam's.
Sam, meanwhile, activating Evolving Wilds, just making sure that he's got as much mana as he needs to work with here. Potentially helping out things like Delirium counts also. There we can see Never to Return, the removal spell with a bit of upside. Return not necessarily as relevant in this matchup as it is in Sun, but when there's the likes of Eternalized cards going on, the Aftermath can be pretty potent.
Another Virtuous Gearhulk for Sam. If I'm Sam, I'm tempted just to slam Gearhulk and not even necessarily use Crypt Breaker, just maybe start attacking with everything. Sam is just in such good shape here.
Yeah, get that damage on the board. It looks like he's tempted to put at least one counter on his Virtuous Gearhulk, simply so that it's out of range of Grasp of Darkness, though.
Yeah, get those 3 counters on the Crypt Breaker. Just go for the throat.
I like this a lot. There's going to be some smashing very shortly.
Sasabe pretending like he's got Grasp of Darkness or Fatal Push. In reality, he's just thinking about, well, kind of how he wishes his draws have lined up just a little better against Sam's, because I think Sam Pardee might be advancing to the quarterfinals here, or semifinals here.
I mean, to be honest, when I'm Yusuke Sasabe looking back at this match, I don't know if this is the game that I'm going to feel most rough about. I mean, this has just been a terrible set of draws. That happens. I'd be looking at some of the other games and thinking, were there different plays that I could have made? Were there moments, maybe the very first game where he elected to let Grim Flare stay in play, that he may ultimately find himself thinking about, because at this point, fairly soon, he is going to be left thinking, because there are just so many threats on Sam Pardee's side of the battlefield, that winning from this point is going to be very tough for the Japanese player.
Oh, this game is over. Sam actually does just have lethal here, thanks to Never to Return in hand, and that means that Sasabe is going to have to think about what he could have done differently in this match. But he also had a great finish. I mean, this is his first Pro Tour, and he made top 8. Like that, there is nothing to be sad about when you think about it that way.
Absolutely not. And we will, of course, get a chance to see him at the next Pro Tour because this top 8 finish easily enough to qualify him. There's the handshake. Congratulations to Sam Pardee. We can hear the roars of applause. We know that Sam Pardee's dad is actually here watching alongside various of his teammates. And congratulations to Sam. We're going to get a chance to see you in the semi-finals. Great stuff from both of these players. And if you're one of the red mages, who would you have preferred to win that matchup, do you think?
That's going to be pretty close. I think I would have preferred that Sasabe won, but you know what the matchup actually looks like. Well, we're going to find out when we get to the semifinals.
We are going to get a shot to find out exactly how Black-Green squares up against red, and indeed get a chance to see another red mirror because we have got our semifinals all lined up. We'll get a chance to come to them soon enough. But for now, here from the feature match area, I'm Tim Willoughby. This has been LSV. Let's head back to the news desk.
Maria Bartholdi back here at the news desk, and it is party time. Our very own Brian David Marshall is down on the floor with the last winner of our final quarterfinal, Sam Pardee.
Thanks, Maria. Party time indeed. Sam, tell us about that matchup. You said, I don't need to play test this. Explain what that meant.
Yeah, I've been playing this green-black deck. I played it in Omaha, made the finals there. I've been playing it on Moto, Infinite. I've played so much of it. Zombies is the same old zombies. I pretty much knew how the cards were going to interact. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I thought he would do. So I felt pretty prepared.
Now, were you a little surprised by how game one played out?
Yeah, I was really surprised the turn he played the Fatal Push. I thought, because he played a land that turn and he'd been mana screwed all game, so I thought there was no way he had a Fatal Push, but I guess he'd been holding it for a while because he'd been using most of his mana every turn, so just trying to find a window, I guess.
Now, you're heading into the fiery jaws of death down the rest of the way here. How does your deck match up against red?
I went 4-2 against red in the Swiss, and I felt like I was pretty favored. I mean, that's the main reason I played it. I knew red would be the deck of this tournament, and I thought I was favored, so 4-2, so hopefully 66%. I don't know. Maybe that gives me a 50% chance to win the Pro Tour.
Now, something else that's going on is you have an opportunity to pull team face-to-face games. We see you wearing the jersey into 4th place in the Pro Tour Team Series, which would actually provide an invite for one of your team members for the next Pro Tour.
Yeah, Jacob only made silver. He fell 1 win short of gold at this event, unfortunately. But that would get him an invite for Albuquerque plus a silver invite, give him a good chance to play all the Pro Tours next year.
How big has that been for the team series, that idea that your results actually just contribute overall to these other players' results?
It's really fun, and it gives like a sense of community and togetherness, and you show up wearing your jerseys and everyone else is in this, you see your teammates and friends in the same jersey, and that's the most important part, is that they are my friends. Like, that's the key thing. These are all people that I really like, so that is what has made it fun for me.
And of course, you're going back to the World Championship for the second year. What has this whole run been like for you?
Fantastic, exactly the same as last year, and let's just lock it in for next year too. Why not?
All right, and he's got a little bit of business to take care of here today, so we're going to send it back to the news desk so we can get these semifinals going here at Pro Tour Hour of Devastation.
Thanks very much, BDM. Rich and Maria here, and we're closing in on lunchtime. Why don't we wrap up our morning's work, though? 5 hours worth of MTG for you in our 4 quarterfinals. So, Maria, we began with Paolo Dama de Rosa against Seth Manfield, which looked like the headline encounter. It didn't look like a headline encounter 2 and a bit games in.
Yeah, Apollo mulliganed to 5 hard a few games and fell quickly behind 2-0 versus Seth Manfield. But in what some people are calling one of the best comebacks we've seen in Pro Tour history, he clawed his way back to a win over Seth Manfield. So Paulo Dama de Rosa, our first quarterfinal winner. Our second quarterfinal, Rich, tell us about that.
Yeah, so we had 4 games here. Yan Wing-chun was playing Ramanat Red against the Black-Red aggro Shintaro Kurada, who was playing in his first Pro Tour top 8 and indeed his first Pro Tour. It went 4 games. We were starting to see a pattern that Hazaret the Fervent kind of changed games quite a bit. And in the end, it was Yan Wing-chun, the number 4 seed, who advanced by 3-1. Into the bottom half we went. Sam Black.
Felix Leong. Let's take a look at this match. So this went to 5 games as well, and as you said, Rich, Hazaret is the name of the game. That card is an all-star here this weekend, especially in a top 8 filled with mono red, and eventually Sam Black did come up on top over Felix Leong.
Yeah, that was a huge deal as well, because that not only made Sam platinum, it guaranteed him a slot at the World Championship. So then we've just seen Sam Pardee against Yusuke Sasabe, Mono Black Zombies against Black-Green Constrictor. And Maria, I mean, we can only imagine what it feels like, but you're sitting there knowing that ahead of you, the way the bracket turned out, there's 3 more or less matching decks. You think you're favored against all 3 of them because they're more or less matching. And first you have to get past the other one. Is it the Black-Green Constrictor? Is it the Mono Black Zombies? And in the end, Sam snuck it out. The last game was not great, and you have to feel sorry for Yusuke Sasabe. Obviously, mana issues happen like that. You flood out. It's just part of the game. But a great job by him. Again, first time at the Pro Tour. So Sam Pardee will play Sam Black later on this afternoon, and our first semi-final will be Paolo Dama de Rosa against Yan Wing-chun. But first, a spot of lunch for our remaining players.
Yeah, and while they're having lunch, we're going to take you inside R&D. These are always really cool segments. We get a chance to talk with the people behind the game, the people in R&D who are making this game happen for us. And now we're going to learn a little bit about the God Pharaoh himself, Nicol Bolas.
The idea of Amonkhet block had always been it was part Egypt, part Bolas. So the idea for Amonkhet was it was like mostly Egypt with a little bit of Bolas. While our Devastation is a little bit of Egypt with a lot of Bolas.
One of the jokes that has happened a lot with Nicol Bolas is he's this big bad who doesn't do anything. Like, we've seen him behind the scenes a lot. We've seen him making plans. We haven't really seen him do anything. For a lot of people, that they wonder, like, well, what is the big deal with Nicol Bolas? Like, is he really that tough? And as the Gatewatch finds out very quickly, he's not a pushover like the Eldrazi were.
Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, all along is one of the most important cards in the set, a card that we spent a lot of time talking about and iterating on. We knew we wanted him to be extremely powerful, very exciting to read at first glance. We decided early on that he would have 4 abilities, kind of representing just the magnitude of his power and giving him extra versatility and constructed. And because we knew we wanted the card to be very powerful and very splashy, it made a lot of sense to position it as a high mana cost card that might go in a controlling deck, maybe something to use to finish up the game.
Nicol Bolas. He's like the perfect mix of a flavorful card and a powerful card. So when you cast this guy, you really want to start taking over the game immediately. The first ability exiles cards from the opponent's deck until you find a non-land card and you just cast it. So it could be a removal spell on your opponent's guy or their planeswalker or their creature, but either way, this ability is going to help you in the game. The second ability is a way to help you stabilize, so maybe your opponent only has 2 or 3 cards in their hand. Well, you have to make sure that those cards don't kill Nicol Bolas, so you want to use this ability to get their last cards out of their hand to just guarantee that when you untap with this planeswalker, you have a huge advantage.
Made a card that was basically, this is the thing you want to do if you're playing a control deck and you just want a huge planeswalker to kind of end the game. You know, it does a wide variety of things. It provides a ton of card advantage with both of its plus abilities. Kills off creatures and players with the -4, like 7 damage is a lot. Like, just doing that twice is kind of like an ultimate, but yet it has another ultimate for when the board is really bogged down. You just blow up everything you don't control, and that should win the game.
One of the mistakes I made long ago is I was working on a set called Dark Ascension. And Dark Ascension was all about the bad guy. The humans were on the brink of extinction. And when I first started to design it, I took it from the point of view of the humans. Like, oh no, things are horrible. And then finally, I realized that I'd made a mistake. That the fun part of that set was not being the humans that were on the brink of death. It was being the monsters that were being victorious. And I think we embrace the same thing here, which is, like, this is a set all about destruction. But rather than be on the side of the people being destroyed, let's take it to the other side. Let's be on Bolas' side. Let's, you get to bring the destruction. And so one of the fun things about the set is it's very destructive, but you, the player, get to bring the destruction. That you get a little sense of Bolas. This is a chance for you to get a taste of what it's like to be Bolas and just recklessly destroy things, or carefully destroy things, I guess, in his case.
The cycle that I fought for was the defeats. It is this story about Bolas triumphing, and I really wanted you as the player to get to experience what it's like to be Bolas. And if you've ever, wanted to sort of smush Jace's face into the sand, well, you get this moment where you get to do that with a card. And so they were something that people kept raising their eyebrows at a little bit, and I was like, no, this is going to be really cool. You're going to have this answer to Jace that shows Jace getting knocked down, and the same for Gideon and for Chandra and for Liliana. And I really thought that was this cool moment.
The defeat cycle came from early design. It's quite flavorful, really kind of like the story that these cards tell. We wanted to show Nicol Bolas just kind of utterly ruining the Gatewatch in kind of heads-up combat, which is something that hadn't really come up in the story before. So We talked a lot about kind of how to position these cards. We talked about it could be kind of utility cards or removal spells that had upgrades against the Planeswalkers, but we wanted to kind of mitigate the factor where, if we gave you just a strong removal spell that was super effective against, Liliana, for example, well, we have Liliana cards in the environment that we actually want you to play with to some degree as well. So we didn't want to go overboard on hating on the Planeswalkers, because we wanted a good, healthy environment where you're not overly punished for playing with a card that we're telling you is awesome. So these defeat cards kind of evolved over time into how can we make these into sideboard cards that are particularly effective against the Planeswalkers, but also have some utility even if your opponent isn't playing with the Planeswalker or happen not to draw it in that game. So we looked back at the Theros self-color hate cycle, Glare of Heresy being an example of one of those cards. And we kind of patterned these cards off of those such that they're strong enough to play to sideboard in many cases against a deck of that color, and if that deck is also playing that Planeswalker in some number of copies, sometimes you'll get a little extra bonus as well and kind of get the achievement unlocked feeling of, killing Jace with Jace's defeat or whatever else the case may be.
The defeats have really fun quests to put yourself on. There's something that, you get a lot of satisfaction of. It's not just that you exiled your opponent's attacking creature, but you got their Gideon. And let's face it, we're all ready to exile Gideon at this point.
We had the Oath cycle. We've seen that. We started in Oath of the Gatewatch, and it has continued, since then. And we wanted to do a parallel that shows, okay, we had everyone buys into the idea of the Gatewatch, and then we want to show what happens when they're totally outmatched. Absolutely outmatched, without question. And Bolas is a character that even the collective force of the Gatewatch, he's too much for them. And so this defeat cycle really shows that they're in over their heads. They're going to need some more help.
We knew that Bolas was going to defeat the Gatewatch. That was important. This is really a comeuppance for the Gatewatch. This is their pride being pushed too far. This is them not realizing the scope of what they're up against. But we wanted to go a step farther than that. Bolas didn't want to just defeat them. He wanted to utterly defeat them. He wanted to go to each one on a personal level and defeat them in a way personally that just that just says, I am beating you. I understand who you are as a person, and I'm particularly beating you in a way that's going to hurt you the most. And so what the cycle is he goes to each one of them and he finds a way not just to beat them, because he's cruel, to beat them in a way that will forever, to beat them in a way that they'll never ever forget. And that he is vicious, he is mean, and this cycle shows not just them losing, but them losing in the utterly worst possible way.
My favorite part about Hour of Devastation is you get to see Bolas at his full power. It's not when he sends one of his lackeys to do something. This is him. He has created a world for the sole purpose of making this, destruction, and he has come in and he has done it, and he's an active participant, and he just decimates the Gatewatch, and it's just so great to watch him really getting in there, getting his hands dirty, and showing you what an Elder Dragon Planeswalker is really all about.
For me, the big takeaway particularly from Hour of Devastation, is that Bolas wins. Bolas gets the moment. If you are a fan of the villain, revel in that.
Sometimes you end a story in which it's closed, we're done, we're finished, okay? The story is over. And sometimes you want to end in a just exciting, flashy way that people don't expect, and you go, wait, what's going to happen next? And so the idea is the Gatewatch comes here. Look, we've seen them deal with the Eldrazi, they dealt with Tezzeret. Look, they're coming, they're going to deal with Bolas. And what we want to have happen is show you Bolas is truly scary and make you go, what's going to happen next? The Gatewatch are just utterly defeated. Why, what? And so we really wanted to end on a note that said, hey, you know what? Come back. There's more story to tell.
Maria Bartholdi joined by Brian David Marshall here in our tournament center, and it's time to talk teams. We've been following their stories all weekend, all year really. Brian, what's happening?
Well, you know what? This has been the Pro Tour Team Series. This is the debut season of it. And for the last several events, players coalesced into groups of 6 team members. And the results, the pro point totals for those players are accumulated throughout the season. And now the top 2 teams, the 2 teams that have accumulated the most pro points over the course of this run, are going to get invited to a special 2-team playoff at the World Championship in Boston. And you know what? They get to play Team Sealed.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Team Sealed, which is really kind of just the format that, you see these
Teamwork,
teams making their names. So let's take a look at the teams that are in the finals here. No secret, Musashi, this is just a superstar team.
Yeah, they were dominating coming into this tournament. It's just unreal.
Yeah, and in fact, they had both Ken Yukihiro and Shota Yasoka in the top 8. I mean, Yuya Watanabe in the top 8 of the last Pro Tour. Shota Yasoka, won a Pro Tour to start the season, and they were so far ahead in this race as they came into the last event that honestly they could have not shown up, and I think still got there. And they didn't have a great tournament actually here in Japan, but still a commanding lead. They had 119 points coming in, and we'll see where they ended up at the end on the leaderboard.
I was talking to Yuya earlier in this tournament, and he told me that, I was like, how did you pick your team? How did you just pick the greatest team that's in the team series? And he said, well, we just picked the best players in Japan. What can I say?
Also, just kind of interesting, Yuya Watanabe, Shota Yasoka, and Ken Yukihiro, they're all going to be competing at the World Championship, in the World Championship as well, individually.
Yes.
So this is I mean, I guess that's not necessarily a shock. I guess if you've put together the best record over the course of the season, you're probably going to churn a couple individual players to the top of the standings.
All right, who's in our second place slot?
Team Genesis. Again, these 2 teams both held serve, if you will, coming into this event. They were the second place team. You see they had 94 points coming in. A little bit of a flip-flop here. Michael Majors, who was on the team for the first couple of events, not playing in this event. He's gone to work at Wizard, so good on him. That's a great opportunity for him, and a great opportunity for Thomas Hendricks, who gets to step in at the last moment and get to now play in the finale in Boston.
All right, let's take a look at the overall team series leaderboard, because it is kind of important and still in flux who is going to come in 3rd and 4th.
Right. If things ended right now as it was, Team MTG bent card would be in 4th place. But you see these colored bands here: Mutiny, Fireball Ice, Face-to-Face Games. They all have, well, Sam Pardee, Paulo Vitor Damarosa, and Sam Black still alive in this tournament. And, well, you know what? That could displace MTG bent card from the top 4, which would cost Anthony Lee an invite to the next Pro Tour.
Well, thanks so much, BDM. You were talking with teams this whole weekend, and you actually went out to some houses, and we have a really fun video where you asked them about some of the players' their favorite cards in the history of the game.
It was an open-ended prompt. I was like, tell me a story about a Magic card. Magic players, they're like,
oh yeah.
They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. Just tell me a story about a Magic card. Do what you want with it.
All right, let's check it out.
You want to hear? I'll tell you a cool story about a specific Magic card. I once owned a copy of Ancestral Recall. It was beta, right? And one day I just couldn't find it. And I thought it had gotten stolen or been lost or something. And then I ended up moving. So years later, like literally 3 years later, I was moving boxes in my car, and I had my dog in the back seat. And so the dog got into one of the boxes, and she broke a picture frame. And so I stopped because I didn't want her to cut herself. So I stopped, and so I put her in the front seat, and like who I was with, he went in the back. And then like I picked up the picture frame to clean it up, and the picture came out, and behind the picture I had hidden the Ancestral Recall for safekeeping. So the dog found it in there. I gave her a bunch of treats, and I told her, thank you for finding my Ancestral Recall.
Well, this is actually last weekend at the Grand Prix. One of my favorite cards is Emrakul, the Promised End. I mean, my best finish in a Pro Tour was with it. I also just love it because it's just fun, complex, interesting. It's a puzzle every time you play it, trying to do the most busted stuff you can with it. A fan came up to me at the Grand Prix and he asked me to sign Emrakul, the Promised End. I liked it, signed it. I took a picture because it looked cool. It was Japanese. And then later I heard a story about how he had me sign Emrakul, and he went up to Huey and he had him sign Ulamog, and then he went up to Reed and he goes, "I'm sorry," and he handed him Kozilek, that one, because it's just so much worse and nobody ever plays. He goes, "I'm sorry." He wanted the Peach Garden Oath with the 3 Eldrazi's, and Reed got stuck with the Kozilek.
Man, one Magic card. Well, I mean, I guess my favorite Magic card was definitely Ophidian. And I remember hearing that Dave Humphries had played a deck with it, and I was like, I'm gonna throw together a deck with that bad boy. And it was just so nice, right? I mean, people didn't even realize oh, I should block this instead of the 2/2. And then it came up to nationals. And screw it, I'll just throw this deck together. I've been playing with it, but it was one of those fun decks I'd played. In fact, one of the people here, Chris, we once played a mirror match about 50 times, and I won 33-13, so I guess it was 46. So Ophidian definitely has a place in my heart, and then making a national team with it. So.
Okay, well, this is about a fairly obscure Magic card. It's called Zephyr Falcon. It's a 2-mana 1/1 flying vigilance. Except when I learned to play the game back in 4th edition Ice Age, what it said on the card was attacking doesn't cause it to tap. So my brother Ian and I were self-taught Magic players. All we had was our starter pack and the little instruction insert that came in the pack, and that's how we learned to play. But one of the first games we were playing, my brother played Zephyr Falcon. I played my 3rd land and said go, and he's like, "Okay, attack you for 1, you're at 19. I'm like, "Okay, I'm at 19. Okay, attack you again, you're at 18. I'm like, "All right, I'm at 18. He's like, "Attack you again, you're at 17. We didn't know you could only attack 1 time as long as your creature was untapped. You just keep going at it. So we played a few games like that. We're like, you know what? This card's just not very fun. Let's not play with it anymore. So, that was the end of Zephyr Falcon until we actually learned the proper way to play with it.
Welcome back to the news desk. Maria Bartholdi, joined by Hall of Famer Luis Scott Vargas, and we've got all of our quarterfinals in the books for this morning, and we're looking forward to semifinal number 1, Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa versus Yam Wing Chung. So let's take a look at Paulo's stats as a player, just 29 years old. This is his 12th Pro Tour top 8, lifetime pro points 586, a platinum pro. Take a look at his deck that he's playing as well. We saw it earlier this morning, Ramunap Red. And this deck looks to attack early and attack often. Luis, how do you like Paulo's build in this matchup?
The main decks for both him and his opponent are fairly similar, but how the decks play out post-sideboard is, of course, going to change a lot of what goes on. Both decks look to, like you said, attack early and often, curve out with 1-drops, finish off with burn spells. Post-board, they get to go a little bigger. Chandra, Torch of Defiance, cards like Glorybringer can make an impact. But, you know, the story that we've seen so far, it's really all about Hazoret. So
yeah.
we're going to see who can wield Hazoret first and who can wield Hazoret the fastest.
All right, we've got Brian David Marshall standing by with Li Shitian to let us know a little bit more about Paulo's competitor.
Now, you have known Yam Wing Chung for a long time. Tell us about how long you guys have been playing Magic together.
He started wanting to play professional Magic like 4 years ago, and I traveled with him to play the PTQ in China, and then he took down that PTQ, and then we started playing Pro Tour together for last 4 years.
And now we did an interview with him yesterday when he clinched his top 8, and he talked about this idea that he's been watching you get a chance to play in the top 8 so many times, 5 times, pretty impressive career here. What's it like now to have the opportunity to see him get his moment on the big stage and perform so well and obviously have such a good time while he's doing it?
Yeah, it is one of my biggest goals for having a second Hong Kong player to make Pro Tour top 8. Like, I try to build up community in Asia, and then I try to help the people from Hong Kong to play better Magic, and now I finally, got someone I can root for now.
Now, we talked, Luis was just talking a little bit about sideboarding. This is going to be a little bit of a dance, you were telling me, between like whether the decks go big or small, and both players are going to be maybe like playing a guessing game with each other in sideboarding?
Yeah, we saw it in the quarterfinals. Sometimes you have all the removal spell, but when one player got Hazoret, in the game is just over because you can't remove Hazoret. And then sometimes you got lots of big cards in hand, and then your Hazoret doesn't perform. So I think it's about having a better Hazoret after sideboard.
All right, it's all about Hazoret. It's also all about rooting for another player from Hong Kong, maybe getting another player going to the World Championship to join you if Yam Wing Chung wins his whole run the rest of the way. Sending it back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks so much, BDM. It's all about the Hazorets, baby. Let's look at Yam Wing Chung, who will be going up against Paulo Vitor Dama de Rosa in this, our very first semifinal. 25 years old, 109 lifetime pro points. This is his first Pro Tour top 8. He has a gold pro, and of course, bringing Ramunap Red to the table, the same as Paulo. Is there anything different about his deck, Luis, that you can see that is kind of stands out to you?
Well, Paulo chose not to play any copies of Incendiary Flow, and that means that he has a little bit less direct damage than Yam Wing Chun. And then again, post-board, Paulo has cards like Aether Sphere Harvester, whereas Yam is a little bit more reliant on things like Chandra, Torch of Defiance.
If you're sitting down there getting ready to play this red mirror, what are you hoping for in how the game plays out for you?
You want to curve out, and you want to play Hazoret on 4.
Yeah.
It's really hard to overstate how important Hazoret is to the matchup. We just saw Sam Black, for example, really win on the back of Hazoret. When his opponent, Felix Leong, had Hazoret, he won. And the fact that she's indestructible and really hard to stop means that Hazoret is what both these players are going to be looking for.
Is there any other sideboard decision that you think might be kind of critical? Hazoret, of course, one of the big things of the match. What else do you think might come into play?
Trying to figure out what mix of removal and threats you want is important, because if you go too threat light, have too many removal spells in hand, then your opponent can actually just trump those with Hazoret. And that's kind of what we've seen, is a handful of Shocks and Incendiary Flow and Chandra's Defeat and Collective Defiance all lose to Hazoret.
Something that's kind of a bit of a stigma for red decks is that they're really easy to play. You just play your creatures, you turn them sideways, but that's kind of not what I saw happening in some of the earlier games. It did in some of them, but sometimes the math can get a little bit tricky as you're trying to figure out, do I need to stay back because my opponent will have a hasty creature or something like that.
Yeah, I think that people tend to oversell how easy it is to play these aggressive decks. Turns out playing aggressive decks is also hard. It's a different kind of skills necessary than to play control decks, but I think you are underselling the deck if you think that it's just as easy as turning creatures sideways.
You were testing with some of these teams, or at least you weren't testing, but watching some of them and talking to them as they were testing. Was the feeling coming in that they were going to see this many red decks dominate and enter in the top 8 eventually?
So red was slated to be the most popular deck. I think most of the people I talked to thought that, but people tended not to realize how popular it was going to be. It was about a quarter of the field. It was like 24.8% of the field.
Yeah.
And of course 6 in the top 8. So it did better than people thought, which indicates that it was even better than most people predicted.
I was talking to Paul Chion earlier this weekend, who was talking to me about Ramming Up Runes and Earthshaker Kenra, and I asked, does the red deck exist without either one of these cards, which are our new additions from Hour?
Without Ramming Up Runes, certainly not. Earthshaker Kenra is a critical piece of the deck, but I think it could be replaced, even though that would be a downgrade. Runes is really important, though.
If you were coming in to play this tournament, I know you're going to get back into Magic coming up after this Pro Tour. What deck do you wish you had packed with you if you were in their spot?
I probably would have played the red deck. Paulo and I, for example, tend to play the same decks a lot of the time. A lot of the guys on Channel Fireball Fire ended up with the deck. Sam Black, of course, one of the people testing there, ended up on mono red. So I wouldn't be surprised if I sleeved up some deserts.
How hard is it to see a deck like this mono red deck coming when you're poring over the new cards of a set and you're trying to put something together? Does a card like Ramming Up Runes just jump out to you and you say, hey, I think this deck that might be a mono red deck is viable now?
I think a lot of people got to Ramming Up Ruins, and it was one of the more popular Magic Online decks, which goes to show that even though the deck was the most popular, it still was a deck that was hard for people to compete with. And a deck being the known quantity best does not mean it's a bad deck to play.
And Paulo is still in the mix for Player of the Year. He's looking to take down Marcial Carvalho. If he wins the whole tournament, well, he clinches it. And if he is in the finals but loses, he ties with Marcial. Can you tell me a little bit about what that might mean?
Well, I think that a Player of the Year title is very important. It's very impactful. And Paulo would, of course, love to be able to walk away with Player of the Year, especially since if he wins Player of the Year today, that means he's a Pro Tour champion for the second time,
yes,
which is going to make Paulo very, very happy. If he has to play Marcial in a playoff, I think he'll be able to live with that too, but he would love to be able to clinch that title.
Thanks so much, Luis. Well, our players are ready down in the feature match area, so let's head into our first semifinal.